Yesterday, Glenn talked to us about the call of Moses from Exodus chapter 3. And I don't know about you, but there were several things he talked about that were really, they were really poignant. They really even spoke to my life after doing missions for 30 years. And so today, we want to unpack the next step in Moses' life. And we're going to look at Exodus 4 through 12. And we're going to talk about persevering in the call. You remember yesterday, Glenn talked about Moses out in the wilderness, the burning bush. God calls him, go and deliver my people. And there was so much clarity in that. But if you've been doing anything at any point in your life for God, you also realize that along with the clarity that initially comes, sometimes there comes a time where that call is tested, where perseverance is required. And that's what we want to look at today. In Exodus chapter 4, we see that Moses has an immediate favor on his life. God has spoken to him. He's given him a sign. He says, he takes this staff and he says, throw it down. And Moses throws it down. It turns into a snake. And God tells him, he goes, you're going to use this sign to convince the people that I have called you. So Moses, I'm sure, is thinking, great, I've got God's favor on my life. And then he goes ahead of him and he talks to his brother Aaron, who he hasn't seen in 40 years. And he tells Aaron, go out and meet Moses. We also see that God gives Moses favor with his father-in-law, Jethro. And we're going to talk about him later on this week in another aspect. But Moses is getting ready to leave, and his father-in-law, who in that culture, he needed his blessing, God gives him favor, and Jethro says, go and do whatever God's called you to do. And so he goes and he meets Aaron out in the wilderness. And chapter 4 ends with these words. Aaron spoke all the words that Moses had given to him, and he did the signs in front of the people, and the people believed. And when they heard that the Lord had visited the people of Israel and that he had seen their afflictions, they bowed their heads and they worshiped. I mean, at that moment, it seems like everything is going great. This is going to be quick. It's going to be one and done. God's going to show up in power and he's going to deliver his people. And of course, we know the story. We know it doesn't exactly turn out that way. This brings me to my very first takeaway, and that's the call of God is often accompanied with immediate favor, but followed by intense testing. I know I experienced that in my own life. That immediate moment of clarity, God speaks, you know what to do, and then as time passes, you also realize, man, this is not going to be as easy as I thought it was going to be. You hear God's voice with ease. Everything seems so clear. God answers your prayers, and he answers them the way you want them answered. Then that time of testing comes, and God's voice seems so remote, or sometimes you don't even hear him. There's confusion. You find yourself asking questions like, God, where are you? I can't hear your voice. Can't you talk to me like you did at the beginning? This is very, very common. The answer is that when this is happening, God's using this testing to grow us on the inside into the size of the calling he has for the external manifestation of our call. The bigger the call, the bigger the testing. In chapters 5 through 11, we read after one test after another, Pharaoh's heart becomes hard. He takes away the straw that the Israelites need to make bricks. And that makes their task even harder. And before long, the people are actually angry at Moses. We read the text here. It says, but the Lord said to Moses, now you shall see what I will do to Pharaoh, for with a strong hand I'm going to send the people out, and with a strong hand I'm going to drive them out of this land. God spoke to Moses and said to him, I am the Lord. I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, to Jacob as God Almighty, but by my name, the Lord, I will make myself known to them. I also established a covenant with them to give them a land, the land of Canaan, the land in which they lived as sojourners. Moreover, I have heard the groaning of the people of Israel, whom the Egyptians have as slaves, and I have remembered my covenant. Say therefore to the people of Israel, I am the Lord, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians, and I will deliver you from slavery, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great acts of judgment. I will make this people, I will take you out of the land. I will be your God, and you shall know that I am God. I am the one who has brought you out from the burden of the Egyptians. Keeps doing all this. He keeps making all of these promises. And then it says, Moses spoke thus to the people of Israel, but they didn't listen to Moses because of their broken spirit and their harsh slavery. This takes me to our second, third, and fourth takeaways. First, people process your call through their own circumstances, but only you are responsible for your actions. Kindness, love, and patience always win out. I can think of many times where young people felt God's call in their life and they were all excited, and then they shared it with a family member, and then it was like somebody just doused cold water on it. My wife's own personal story, the very first person she talked to about her call was a person she cared deeply about, and she shared it with them, and she was on the phone with them, and their response was, they said, "You're crazy," and they hung up the phone. 30 years later, that person's one of our biggest supporters. Kindness and love and patience always win out. Secondly, opposition can create self-doubt. Being aware of this on the front end helps prepare our hearts for that internal battle. Thirdly, God is aware of the challenges you will face, but He still calls you to obedience. Moses felt overwhelmed. He didn't feel like he was capable of living up to the call that God had for his life. But God says to them, in spite of all the opposition they're going to face, you are going to lead my people out of this land. There's two sides of that. There's promise and there's a required obedience. So my final words to you today are, be strong in the Lord, as the Apostle Paul says. Obedience always paves the way for deliverance, and it strengthens us for future battles. The prophet Jeremiah, hearing God speak to him, heard these words, "If you have raced with men on foot and they have wearied you, how will you ever compete with horses?" God may be calling you to spend your life in service amongst the unreached. If so, I can promise you it won't be easy. After all, nothing that's significant is easy. But if He has called you, He promises you not success that you might imagine, but He promises you something even better. He promises you His presence.